My name is Iolanthe Pike. I am 71 years old, and people usually say I have the kind of calm that makes noise uncomfortable. Maybe that is true. I learned long ago that stillness is sometimes the only armor left to wear. That morning, I had pressed the linen of my blouse 3 times, though no one but me would notice. Charleston air was already thick with the kind of humidity that makes pearls sweat. The rooftop cafe on King Street shimmered with light, all glassware and laughter. Cassia sat at the center of it, my only daughter. My late husband's echo, surrounded by friends in pastel dresses and perfect hair. I carried a small white box tied with ribbon. Inside lay a bracelet, my grandmother's silver, worn by 4 generations of women, meant for her wedding day. I waited until the waiter left and the table quieted. "When is the big day?" "Darling," I asked softly. Cassia turned her head, smiling too brightly. "Oh, Mom," she said. Voice sugar over glass. "You missed it." The table rippled with laughter. "You. What? It was yesterday," she added, raising her mimosa. "Small ceremony, private. You know, simple, modern." Her friends grinned as if cruelty were a toast. For a moment, I could not hear anything beyond the clink of her ring against the glass. My fingers tightened on the gift box until the ribbon cut faint lines across my palm. Cassia leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough for me to hear. "You're no longer part of the family. Mom, let's not make this awkward." The words slid into me like cold metal. I felt my breath hitch. But I didn't let it show. Instead, I straightened my shoulders, placed the little box on the table between the salt and sugar, and smiled. "I see," I said. My voice surprised me steady, almost kind. Cassia blinked, perhaps waiting for the scene I refused to give her. Her friends looked away, uneasy in their pretty dresses. I rose, smoothed my sleeve, and left the bracelet where it belonged in the open, gleaming beneath the sun. As I stepped toward the elevator, I realized the hurt had shape now sharp, defined, and I already knew what to do with it. 3 nights earlier, I had signed the first paper, the one that would change everything. Grief has a quiet smell like iron and soap after too much cleaning. After Reese died, I filled the silence with order, lists, bills, meals for one. Cassia came by often at first, always with new suggestions that sounded like orders wrapped in kindness. "Mom, you should really sell the dining set. It's dated," she said one afternoon, running her fingers along the carved edge Reese had sanded himself. "It's oak," I answered. "Solid. Solidly out of style," she muttered, already snapping photos for her phone. It began that way, tiny edits, as if she were rewriting my life in better font. When I misplaced a name at the grocery store, she sighed and said, "You forget a lot lately." When I mentioned Reese, she'd roll her eyes. "Mom, not every story needs to start in 1989. One evening, I found her in the hallway with a cardboard box. My wedding portrait lay inside, face down among family photos. "They clash with the new aesthetic," she said, straightening the frame she'd replaced a stock print from some online shop. "Those were your father's favorite," I whispered. She smiled without looking up. "You weren't using them." The phrase stuck. She repeated it like punctuation about the car, the china, even the kitchen. "You weren't using it, Mom," she'd say, tossing out the old for something glossier. I started keeping receipts, groceries, gas, even the cheap casserole dish she said she'd replace and never did. Habit. Maybe. Or instinct. Reese used to call me his bookkeeper of peace. The night it all crystallized, she was on the phone in the next room, laughing. "She's just background noise," Cassia said, her voice sharp and careless. "She'll fade eventually." I stood in the dark hallway, holding a grocery list, realizing I'd already disappeared from her story. That was the night I stopped trying to explain myself. I began listening instead closely, like an accountant balancing a painful ledger. Love, it seemed, had become a record to keep, and I was done letting the numbers blur. The first night I began, I didn't plan it. I only wanted to clean the drawer where Cassia used to keep her school ribbons. Instead, I found receipts old, curling at the edges, each one proof of something done quietly, and paid for twice, once in money, once in care. By morning, I had a binder. I wrote a single word on the cover in thick black ink receipts. Every page grew heavier with paper, bank slips, screenshots, voicemails transcribed by hand. I printed everything Cassia had said or posted that I couldn't forget. On her public account, she'd written, "Sometimes parents are the real burden. Cut the cord." Underneath, one of her friends commented a laughing emoji. I printed that too. When the printer jammed, I almost laughed. "Even the machine can't believe this," I whispered. A few days later, I ran into Tamsin Orr outside by the hedges. She'd lived next door for 18 years, one of the few who still asked about Reese with softness in her tone. "You doing all right?" "Iolanthe," she asked. I hesitated. "Cassia and I are recalibrating." Tamsin nodded, lowering her voice. "I shouldn't say this, but I overheard her at the cafe last week. She called you a financial burden with opinions." I felt something inside me lock into place. "Would you be willing to repeat that if needed?" Her eyes flickered. "If needed, yes." The next morning, a file arrived on my phone. Tamsin's message read, "You might need this someday." It was Cassia's voice, clear and careless. "She'll be gone soon anyway. She's just noise." I downloaded it and transferred the file onto a small USB shaped like a strawberry Lark had given it to me when he was 8, saying, "So you never lose my stories, Grandma." Now it held a different kind of story. That night, the kitchen clock ticked like a metronome. I sat at the table with my binder open, the strawberry USB beside it, glowing faintly red under the lamp. I took my notebook and wrote the first deliberate line of my new life. "This isn't revenge. This is reclamation." The page absorbed the words as if it understood what I meant. I had avoided the attic since Reese's funeral. The cedar smell lingered up there, sharp and kind at once, like him on a gray Sunday. I finally climbed the narrow steps with a flashlight and a steady hand. His old lockbox sat under a folded quilt. The metal latch stuck, same as always. When it gave, the sound startled me too alive for a dead man's belongings. Inside were the usual things: our marriage license, birth certificates, insurance papers, and an envelope labeled, "If necessary." Reese's handwriting was square and deliberate. I unfolded the single page inside, typed words, no signature. The header read, "Amended intent. Property clause in progress." The language was plain, his kind of plain. "In the event our daughter, Cassia Pike, acts without moral integrity, the home at 814 Longview shall be redirected to our grandson, Lark Pike, under trustee supervision." My breath caught. The line at the bottom was blank, no date, no signature, but the intent was unmistakable. He had seen the fracture forming before I did. I carried the paper to Pastor Lucinda after Sunday service. She was stacking hymnals, the sanctuary half lit with afternoon sun. "You have the look of someone carrying more than groceries," she said. I handed her the page. She read it once, then again, slower, tracing the words with her finger. "Only if necessary," she murmured. "That's what he wrote on the envelope." I nodded. She folded the paper neatly, returned it to me. "Then it's necessary. I know someone who handles quiet things. No billboards, no drama." She gave me a small card, Arden Cole, attorney at Law Estate Affairs. The next morning, I sat in Arden Cole's office, a narrow room that smelled faintly of paper and cedar polish. He read the clause twice. Expression unreadable. with a notarized affidavit and a documented pattern of misconduct. He said finally, "This could hold. It's not about revenge, Mrs. Pike, it's about preservation." I nodded. "Then I'll preserve." He glanced up. "You're already halfway there." As I walked out into the Charleston sun, the city noise felt different, measured, distant. The fear that had sat in my chest for 2 years had shifted. It had turned into purpose. Arden's office smelled of old wood and fresh ink. The kind of place where people signed papers that couldn't be unsaid. He slid a blank legal pad toward me. "You said you wanted to move carefully," he reminded, "then start with what you want to protect." I stared at the page for a long moment before writing 4 short lines. 1, secure my own future. 2, redirect the estate. 3, protect Lark. 4, leave no loopholes. When I looked up, Arden was watching. "That's the language of someone who's been keeping score," he said. "I worked 30 years balancing budgets for men who couldn't do math." I told him, "I know the power of clean numbers." He smiled slightly. "Then you'll understand what a trust can do." We went through the details. Living trust. Revocable until my death. Contingent clause naming Lark as beneficiary under trustee supervision. Cassia's name would be replaced. I initialed each page without hesitation. At the bank, the manager offered me polite sympathy. "We can transfer your savings into a protected account, Mrs. Pike," he said. "You'll retain full control." Full control, I repeated. The phrase settled into me like a heartbeat. That afternoon, I drove home through the narrow Charleston streets. The house looked smaller than it once had, less like a home, more like a ledger closing. I walked inside and opened the folder where Reese used to keep our tax returns. Every line was his handwriting. Steady, deliberate, patience and precision. He used to say, "That's how you stay ahead of mistakes." I whispered the words aloud as I sorted through years of statements, highlighting every account with Cassia's name attached. Each one I called to close, my voice calm, polite, final. By evening, the air smelled faintly of ink and lemon cleaner. I stacked the folders neatly beside the binder, marked receipts, and the strawberry-shaped USB. Together, they looked like chapters of the same book, our story rewritten in paperwork instead of promises. I poured myself tea, steady-handed for the first time in months. The silence of the house no longer felt hollow. It sounded like order. Outside, the porch light flickered once and steadied. Inside, I picked up my pen and drew a small line under the final word on Arden's pad. No loopholes. Arden met me at the notary's counter with a small nod. A man who understood silence better than sympathy, he checked the folder I carried, trust paperwork, affidavits, and Reese's clause from the cedar box. "Once you sign here and here," he said, tapping the pages, "everything transfers into the Pike family trust. You remain trustee until death or incapacity. Cassia has no access." The notary slid the pen toward me. My hand didn't tremble. "Then let's make it official." The stamp came down with a clean click. It sounded like the end of something and the start of something else. From there, it moved quickly. Arden recommended a realtor, a woman named Nella, who spoke with the respect of someone used to widows holding tight to memory. She walked through the Charleston house slowly, her clipboard pressed to her chest. "Solid bones," she murmured, tapping the banister Reese built in 1989. "A house like this doesn't lose value. It just waits for new purpose." "Then let's find someone who'll give it one," I said. Within a week, photos of the house appeared online, light streaming across the floors, rooms stripped of clutter. That same afternoon, my phone buzzed 3 times in a row. Cassia. First voicemail. Sweet and brittle. "Hey, Mom, I think there's a mistake online. Are you really selling second call me back? This is insane." Third. If this is some kind of punishment, it's cruel. You know I was counting on that place. I listened once, then deleted all three. Silence. I'd learned carries its own weight. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. One by one, I froze the shared credit cards, updated the beneficiaries, and rerouted every account to the trust. Each confirmation email felt like closing a door gently, but completely. When I finished, the house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I looked around the kitchen, the same tiles Reese laid by hand. The same clock Cassia once complained was old-fashioned. I turned it off. The ticking had done its job. The next morning, a faint breeze moved through the open window, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Cutting loose wasn't loss anymore. It was the sound of my own freedom taking shape. The waterfront restaurant shimmered with laughter, the kind that sounds practiced. I arrived alone, wearing the pearl necklace Cassia once called a clearance bin regret. The hostess blinked at my name, then led me through a maze of white linen tables to the far corner. Cassia was glowing new ring, new husband. Same smile sharpened for an audience. "Oh," she said when she saw me. "You actually came." "I did," I said, setting my purse beside the chair. "You look accomplished." She laughed too loudly. "We were just talking about honeymoon plans. You might find them a bit out of your budget." Her friends tittered. Jasper, her husband, gave a tight grin, already checking his phone. I waited until the coffee was poured and the noise around us softened. Then I reached into my bag and set a manila envelope on the table. "Something old," I said, sliding it toward her. "Something true." Cassia frowned. "What is this?" "Mom." "Another sentimental relic." "Open it." She tore the flap carelessly, pulling out the pages, one by one, the sale confirmation, the fraud report from the boutique loan filed in my name, the revised trust documents listing Lark as sole heir. The laughter around us faded like a sound being unplugged. Cassia's face went pale, then red. "This says the house was sold," she whispered. "You sold my house." "No," I said evenly. "I sold my house, the one you forged a loan against." Jasper's head lifted. "Wait." What? Cassia flipped through the papers, her voice breaking. "This isn't real, she's lying." A calm voice came from behind her. "It's very real." Arden Cole stepped forward, suit pressed, folder in hand. "Mrs. Pike's trust has been notarized and filed. All transactions verified. Any prior claims have been voided." Cassia stared at him, mouth open. "You planned this with her," she hissed. Arden didn't answer. Jasper stood, holding one of the pages. "Cass, did you really forge her signature?" I was just fixing the paperwork." He dropped the page onto the table, the sound flat and final. I lifted my coffee cup, steady as the tide outside the window. "Enjoy your brunch," I said quietly. The only sound left was the soft flutter of paper settling where it belonged, between what was hers and what would never be again. By Friday, the city had already chosen its story. Someone from the brunch had filmed the scene, Cassia's voice raised, Arden's calm reply, my silence. The clip spread faster than gossip ever had in our neighborhood. The title read, "When the Bride Inherits Nothing." I didn't watch it, Tamsin did. She came over that afternoon with 2 mugs of tea and a look that was half shock, half admiration. "She's everywhere," Tamsin said, setting the mug on my table. News blogs, social pages. "They're calling it poetic justice." I stirred my tea. "Poetry wasn't my intent." "I know." She hesitated. "But it fits." Outside. The phone on the counter buzzed again, unfamiliar numbers, all ignored. Arden had called earlier to confirm that Cassia's boutique loan, the one filed in my name, had triggered a full fraud investigation. Every account of hers tied to that application was now frozen. She'll manage, I said softly. She always does. Tamsin nodded, though her eyes said otherwise. Jasper moved out, she added. He's at a hotel. And her friends, well, they're pretending they barely knew her. I didn't answer. The kettle clicked again, refilling the silence. That night, I walked past my old house on Longview for the last time. The new owners had hung curtains, warm light spilling through the windows. It looked alive. I didn't linger. When I returned home, Lark was curled on the couch, a book in his lap. He looked up. Mom's not mad if I stay here. Right, no, I said. Not mad. He yawned, setting the book aside. Grandma, can we bake banana bread tomorrow, the kind with extra cinnamon? I smiled. We can. He leaned against me, already half asleep. His weight was small but certain, an anchor I didn't know I still needed. Later, after he'd gone to bed, Tamsin texted a single line. They're saying you won without shouting. I read it twice, then turned off the phone. The house was still, the air smelling faintly of sugar and night rain. Somewhere in the distance, a gull cried over the harbor, and the sound didn't feel lonely anymore. For the first time in years, the quiet inside these walls felt earned. The cottage near Folly Beach was smaller than the Charleston house, but it breathed easier. One story, pale siding. A porch that faced the marsh. I planted marigolds along the steps. Their color reminded me that some things bloom again, even in poor soil. Lark helped me water them after school. He held the tin watering can with both hands, his tongue pressed between his teeth in concentration. Grandma, he said, can we put a sign on the porch like the ones at the old house? What kind of sign? Something that says it's ours. That evening, I ordered a small brass tag engraved with the words I'd written in my notebook months ago, built by boundaries, kept by respect. When it arrived, we fastened it beneath the porch light together. Lark tightened the last screw and stood back to admire it. It shines, he said. So should we, I told him. The days settled into a rhythm that didn't hurt. Morning walks. Letters from the trust office confirming the final transfer. Arden called once to say, everything is stable. Mrs. Pike. I thanked him and meant it. On Thursday night was us, while washing the last of the dishes. My phone buzzed. The number was familiar. Cassia's voice came through, unsteady, smaller than I remembered. Mom, she began, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm sorry for I pressed save and set the phone face down on the counter. The message kept playing, muffled beneath the hum of the refrigerator. I stood there a long while, the same way I used to listen for Reese's car pulling into the driveway, hoping, yet knowing what was gone couldn't be the same again. Outside, the porch light glowed against the brass tag. Lark's laughter drifted from his room, soft and certain. I stepped out into the night, the air salt-sweet and still. The ocean's edge shimmered beyond the dunes. Steady as breath, forgiveness, I thought, can live quietly inside you, but entry is something else. Some doors stay closed for safety, not spite. I turned off the porch light, leaving the brass tag to catch the moonlight on its own. Forgiveness lives in silence, but access must be earned.